Okay, so over time, you'll notice water evaporating out of this pond, and the water evaporates very, very quickly. Now, every time that you put new water in the pond, if you're only putting a tiny bit of water in and you get the hose and you spray it in there, it really isn't the end of the world. If you start putting larger amounts, you really need to use water ager, and it's safer to use water ager every time, because what the water ager does is take the chlorine and chloramone and all that sort of stuff out of the water, so that doesn't risk the filter bacteria or the fish. So the water will evaporate out, and when you top it up again, add some water ager, and that's called a top up. A water change, on the other hand, is where you're taking water out and you're putting fresh water in again. Now, it's important that water changes are done on a semi-regular basis, otherwise you get what's called accumulants. So you get various things that accumulate in your water, and the things that accumulate in your water over time become a problem. So while you're feeding good quality foods and you don't have too many fish in here, no big drama. But as the fish get bigger, they produce more accumulants or more waste. Therefore, water changes become more important. So one thing I'd recommend that you do on a semi-regular basis is grab your phone, make a video so we can see everything that's going on, and also bring us down a sample of water. We can then test your water and tell you what you need to do over time to make sure it's okay. So you need to make sure that every time you do a water change, you add in water ager, but then over time, we do like to raise the GH and the salts of the water, and that really helps the fish's immune system. We also like to keep an eye on the alkalinity, because Sydney tap water often has an alkalinity of 0. Right now, this alkalinity is 4, which is I'm quite happy with. I'm also a big fan of sludge destroying products. And what these do is help to physically break down the sludge that you get in the pond. So there's products like Pristine from Seachem, and this sludge destroyer is great. And then what this stuff does is you put it in there, it helps to actually break down the physical waste, because the less physical waste we have in the pond, the less chance of your pond going anoxic. Now, the other thing that I'd really love to see in this pond too is a bit of kinetic energy. So basically, see how that one is just pumping straight down? And this one is pumping sort of down by the time it falls off that. Now, what I'd much rather is I'd rather work it out that the movement of the water is creating the movement of the water. And that's called kinetic energy. So we've got a pump down here that's currently blowing up into this monstrosity. I'd be tempted to just disconnect that, and I'd angle that Y piece to try and get the water moving. Because if we can get the water moving, then the movement of the water creates the movement of the water. It's much better economics, and it also means that when your water's flowing, everything doesn't just settle in it. Because if everything does just settle in it, then your pond does become a time bomb. If you can keep it moving and you can keep the sediment up, and then you can have a filter such as the Filter Clear that can export the sediment out of the pond, then you've got a much lower maintenance sustainable system. In a system like this, where that is your filter, that's quite a fair bit of work to clean that. And it really was not effective. So what I did do is I pulled it all out. I cleaned the media in water I removed from the pond. Then I siphoned out the crap that's all in there a few times, but it just kept coming. So it's actually a very high maintenance filter to clean. So the way you set up your pond is really what gives you your experience over time. And I think a Wasa Filter Clear is what I'll be getting here ASAP. Merry Christmas. Now, I'm pumping water out of the pond right now. Now, it is summer here in Australia, so doing a large water change in summer is not a real big problem because the temperature's agreeable. On the other hand, during winter, you don't want to change as much water because then you're more likely to get temperature shock, and the fish really handle it much better in summer. So today I'm doing a decent water change, trying to pump some water out, trying to decrease our accumulants, and then regular small water changes in winter is really the go. Much better than big ones, And then whenever I leave a job like this, it always looks terrible. But when it settles, it looks much better. So this one is a pond salt. I'm going to recommend that's added whenever you do a water change, not a top up. This one is your buffer. I'm going to recommend that gets used when the pH is on the low side or the KH, or when you're topping up, you could certainly add some. Now this one is your water ager. This is your most important one. Now this is basically a lifetime supply. This should last for a very, very long time, because 1 teaspoon of this does like 10,000 litres, because it's 1,250 litres for a quarter of a teaspoon. So anyway, let's call that a lot. So a quarter of a teaspoon does 1,250 litres. Now if you want to know the approximate size of your pond, if you go average width by average length by average depth in centimetres divided by 1,000 gives you litres. So if you worked out that as one section and say that as one section, it doesn't have to be exact, but that'll give you an estimate of how much water's in the pond, and that'll help you with your dosing rates. And at the end of the day, this product is very hard to overdose. So if you're in doubt, add extra. Don't go wasting it though. Otherwise you can threaten your good bacteria. This is really not one fits all or one and we're done. So basically when I leave today, it's very likely this pond is going to look worse than when I started. And at the moment, seeing I've been going and clearing up the pond and disturbing everything, visibility is getting very bad. So you're very limited what you can do once your visibility gets bad. So ponds are really a matter of giving it a clean up, then in a week or two giving it a clean up, then in a week or two giving it a clean up, until you get it where you want to go. It's really not a matter of just one clean and suddenly everything's okay. Otherwise you're going to do too much of a clean, you're going to shock everyone, shock the fish. Now the enemy of a pond is residual trees. So these really look like pretty decent choices. You really don't want the pond under anything that's going to be dropping leaves all the time. You really want like all weather plants. So things like these ferns, they're a pretty good idea. You really want things that are not going to drop much in the pond. Otherwise, if you've got a pond and you're constantly having to get leaves out of the pond, then you'll never win against the decomposition. Okay, so that's enough water removed now. That pump's starting to be exposed. I've scooped a lot of sludge out of the bottom. I've scooped a lot of leaves out of the pond. Basically, as the water clarity improves, we'll see more and more to get out. That's normal. But once again, I'd love to be redirecting this pipe work and seeing that water flow. That'll keep the pond much cleaner. I haven't actually worked out the volume of this pond, that I highly recommend you do. I'm going to estimate this pond about 2,000 litres. So what I'm going to do now is dose 2,000 litres worth of GH salts. I'm going to add a little bit of KH buffer. I'm going to put in a dose of sludge destroyer. But a lot of these bacteria products, if possible, I'd probably rather keep them in the fridge once you've opened it. And then if we just followed the instructions and put some repeat doses in there. So it's saying here twice a week at the start, and then every 2 weeks. So that would be a favourable idea. And then this one you can overdose, but I'm going to put in, say, no more than a quarter of a teaspoon. Now when you're filling up the pond, if you go 5 centimetres, then you put in a quarter of a teaspoon. Actually I'll put in, say, half a teaspoon. Then another 5 centimetres, then another half a teaspoon, and then we're definitely not going to be allowing chlorine in the water to sterilise our pond. So I'm going to put in a quarter of a bottle of this sludge destroyer and hope that that's going to grow lots of good bacteria. And if that could get repeated every couple of weeks, that'd be great.